The safe room held its shape around me, warm stone and low amber light settling into the corners as if it had always belonged there. The waterfall's hush filtered through the wall in a steady rhythm that matched my breathing. I stayed under the quilt a moment longer, letting the quiet finish its work before the day began. The map waited inside the satchel, and I knew it before my hand even reached for it. Today was for the narrow path marked with a careful X, the optional route the system had nudged me toward. Whatever that path held, this room would still be here when I returned. When I sat up, the leather of my armor shifted softly against the fabric. I swung my feet to the floor and let them find balance, feeling the small strength of level 4 resting evenly across my frame. The air carried that faint cedar and clean linen scent that belonged only to this place. I drew the parchment out and let it open between my fingers. The hand-drawn route curved through corridors I'd already walked, then slipped into a thinner branch that ended in that deliberate mark. Whoever left it behind had wanted someone patient to notice. Pale gold letters formed gently beside the desk. Optional route registered. Patience increases probability. Treasure prefers quiet minds. I huffed a quiet breath that almost became a laugh. "You're enjoying this," I said softly, and the letters faded as if satisfied. I folded the map and slipped it back into the satchel. My hand brushed the hood of quiet shadows, then settled briefly on the vine ring at my finger. This wasn't a sprint, and it didn't need to be. I moved to the doorway and stepped through the falling water. Mist cooled my face and dampened the edge of my hair before I reached the narrow ledge outside. The corridor beyond held its pale mushroom glow, roots braided neatly along the walls. I drew up the map overlay in my mind and felt it align with the real path ahead. A faint pulse marked the first turn, steady and unhurried. I started walking, boots landing with careful weight. The corridor curved left, then leveled into a long stretch of living root and packed earth. I slowed before the bend ahead and let stealth settle into my shoulders, a quiet shift in presence rather than a dramatic fade. The world remained clear, simply softer around the edges. A flicker of movement hovered near the next corner. My search clarified the space without flaring, sharpening shape and distance in a calm, measured way. I breathed once, steady and patient, and continued forward. Pixie drift, level 2 to 3. Curious, attracted to sound. 2 of them floated into view, wings dusted in pale shimmer. One tapped idly at a root, the other drifted in slow circles, antennae curling as it studied the glow of a mushroom cap. I stayed still and let my breathing match theirs. The route on my mental map slipped off to the right just past them, narrow and quiet. I reached into the satchel and thought pebble. A smooth stone rested in my palm. I rolled it once between my fingers, then tossed it gently toward the opposite wall. It tapped once and slid into a shallow dip. Both pixies turned at once, wings fluttering as they drifted toward the sound. I stepped forward and let invisibility rise, cool and steady across my skin. My outline dissolved into the mushroom glow. No timer appeared, no dramatic shift, just a clean absence where I had been. I moved past them at an easy pace, keeping my steps light and even. The right-hand passage opened exactly where the map promised. Roots arched overhead in a soft curve, and the air held a faint herbal scent that hadn't been present before. I slipped inside and let the seam of shadow close behind me. A pale gold shimmer blinked at the edge of my vision. Stealth refined. Invisibility, stability improved. You're learning to listen before moving. I felt that warmth settle into my chest. My movements smoothed without conscious effort, weight shifting with a touch more balance. It wasn't flashy, just cleaner. The corridor narrowed, then widened into a small chamber woven from root and stone. The mushroom light here glowed pale white instead of violet. My invisibility eased off naturally, leaving me standing alone in the quiet. Search offered gentle labels around the room. Loose tile, dust trail, hidden latch. I crouched near the latch, fingers brushing the grain of the wood. The mechanism felt simple, almost welcoming. I pressed it lightly, and a slim panel slid open in the wall. Inside rested a narrow spool wrapped in dark thread that shimmered faintly when it caught the light. A small parchment tag lay beside it, letters precise and steady. I lifted the spool and let appraisal rise. Item: whisper thread spool. Rarity: rare. Description: fine shadow-bound thread. Enhances subtlety when applied to gear. Compatible with leather armor and cloaks. A quiet smile pulled at my mouth. Well, that's useful. The thread felt cool and weightless in my palm. I tucked it into the satchel, already imagining reinforcing seams along the armor's shoulders or lining the inside of the hood. A faint pulse moved through me. Craft synergy unlocked. Future enhancements possible. Treasure enjoys preparation. I stood and brushed my hands against my knees. The chamber felt complete now, like it had offered exactly what it meant to offer. No chest, no coins, just something rare and deliberate. I returned to the narrow corridor and followed the map's next bend. The path sloped gently downward, the air cooling by a degree that felt intentional. I kept my steps measured and my breathing steady. Ahead, the route split again, this time with faint glowing dust drifting across the floor. My search clarified the pattern immediately. Pixie patrol path. Loop interval. Short. Low aggression unless startled. I drew the hood of quiet shadows from the satchel and let the fabric settle in my hands. I didn't lift it yet. I watched the patrol once, letting their rhythm reveal itself. 2 pixies drifted across the corridor, paused to examine the dust, then turned and retraced their path. Their timing stayed even. I waited for them to pass, then pulled the hood over my head. The world hushed. Sound thinned. Light dimmed slightly at the edges. A quiet silver timer appeared in my peripheral vision, counting down from 10 minutes with patient precision. I stepped into the patrol route and moved through it without hurry. The pixies drifted inches away, wings stirring faint currents in the air, but none of it touched me. The map's crooked symbol appeared ahead once more, carved lightly into a route that twisted toward the floor. I reached it with 5 minutes left on the hood's timer. I pressed my hand against the carving. The ground shifted gently beneath my boots, revealing a narrow, descending stair hidden under layered root. Cool air rose from below, scented faintly with old parchment and something metallic. The hood's timer ticked down quietly As I stepped onto the first stair, Treasure liked patience, and I was in no rush. The stair descended in a slow curve beneath the roots, each step smooth and evenly spaced. Cool air rose from below and brushed against my face, steady and dry. The hood's timer continued its quiet count in the corner of my vision. I moved without haste, keeping my weight centered over each step. The leather armor shifted easily with me, barely a sound. The whisper thread spool rested deeper in the satchel, a small reminder of preparation done well. The stair leveled into a narrow corridor, carved from compact earth and interwoven root. Pale mushrooms lined the lower walls, casting a soft, consistent glow. The map in my mind aligned again, its drawn line narrowing towards the marked chamber. A faint shimmer drifted across the floor ahead, almost invisible until I slowed. Search clarified it with gentle precision. Fine filament field, reactive to rapid movement, harmless but alerting. I lowered myself into a crouch and studied the pattern. The filaments stretched from root to root in irregular layers, thin as breath and lightly anchored. They carried a faint hum, barely audible beneath the hood's quiet. I adjusted my footing and stepped between them, placing each movement with care. The hood extended silence around me, smoothing the air as I passed. No vibration traveled through the threads. Halfway across, pale gold letters formed near the ceiling. Efficiency noted. Minimal disturbance increases yield probability. I resisted the urge to smile and kept moving. On the far side of the filament field, the corridor widened into a low chamber, reinforced by thick crossing roots. The air here held a dry mineral scent. A single lantern hung from a hook in the ceiling, flame steady and unchanged by my presence. A desk sat against one wall, nearly identical to the one from the earlier locked room. Beside it rested a tall shelving unit, carved directly from root, holding sealed jars and folded cloth. No enemies appeared on the overlay. I let the hood drop, saving the remaining time. Sound returned in full, though the room remained quiet. My breathing settled into an even pace. I approached the desk first and ran my fingers lightly across the surface. Dust lay thin and undisturbed. The single drawer bore no visible lock. Search offered more detail. Weighted hinge. Rear release latch. Opens with downward pressure. I pressed down gently on the far edge and felt the mechanism release. The drawer slid open in one smooth motion. Inside rested a small metal case no larger than my palm. Its surface held faint geometric etchings that reflected the lantern light. A single clasp secured the lid. I opened it. Within lay a compact lens mounted in a slim bronze frame, attached to a leather cord. The glass shimmered faintly, almost like water caught in sunlight. Appraisal rose naturally. Item: surveyor's lens. Rarity: rare. Effect: enhances detection of concealed seams, false walls, and hidden compartments within short range. I turned it once in my fingers. The weight felt balanced and deliberate. I slipped the cord over my head and let the lens rest against my chest beside the quartz pendant. The room sharpened subtly. Fine lines appeared along the walls where root met stone. Slight variations in texture stood out more clearly. My search settled more comfortably in the space, requiring less effort. A quiet notification followed. Search efficiency increased. Hidden object detection range improved. That felt right. I moved to the shelving unit next. Several jars sat sealed with wax, each labeled in tidy script. I lifted one and read the label. Root resin, binding agent, stable, crafting compatible. I replaced it and examined the rest without opening them. Nothing urgent called to me. This room felt designed as a support chamber rather than a vault. I stepped back into the center and drew up the map again. The drawn path continued past this chamber through a lower corridor that angled sharply left before reaching the marked X. A faint flicker moved along the lower passage. Pixie cluster, level 3 to 4. Heightened curiosity. More of them this time. I adjusted the hood back over my head and let silence settle once more. The timer resumed from where it had paused. The surveyor's lens shifted lightly against my chest as I walked. The lower corridor narrowed into a tunnel of packed soil, reinforced with thick roots. Pixies drifted near the ceiling in loose formation, trailing faint motes of light that fell and dissolved before reaching the ground. I slowed and studied their pattern. 3 formed a loose triangle, rotating positions every few seconds. 2 more hovered near the wall, examining a patch of glowing moss. Their spacing left narrow windows. I stepped forward when the nearest rotated away. My movement stayed smooth and level. The hood held the air around me in steady quiet. One pixie paused mid-drift, wings adjusting slightly as if sensing a change. I stopped completely and let my breath settle into stillness. The pixie resumed its rotation. I continued. As I passed the moss cluster, the surveyor's lens shimmered faintly. A thin seam appeared in the wall that had not been visible before, running vertically behind the moss growth. I marked it in memory and kept moving. The treasure waited farther ahead, and patience remained the better choice. The tunnel sloped downward and opened into a wide chamber, supported by massive crossing roots. The air felt cooler here, more stable. The floor smoothed into compact stone rather than soil. The pixies thinned out, their patrol fading behind me. At the far end of the chamber, partially concealed by hanging root strands, stood a reinforced wooden door. No glow marked it, no dramatic light spilled from beneath. The surveyor's lens warmed faintly against my chest. Concealed mechanism detected. Triple latch system. Non-lethal deterrent. I approached slowly and let the hood's timer tick down to its final minute before lowering it. Silence receded gently. I knelt beside the door and studied the hinges. 3 locking points revealed themselves through the lens. 1 near the base, 1 mid-frame, 1 near the top seam. I reached into the satchel for the disarm kit. This one would take precision, and I had plenty of time. I steadied myself in front of the reinforced door and adjusted the surveyor's lens so it rested clearly against my chest. The triple latch system revealed itself through faint structural lines running along the frame. Each mechanism sat concealed behind a thin layer of compacted root and stone. I crouched and let trap detection settle fully into place. The lower latch carried a tension spring linked to a subtle vibration trigger. It would not injure me, but it would announce me. I began with the bottom mechanism. A thin pick slid into the seam and found the purchase immediately. I eased the pressure back in slow increments until the internal spring released with a soft, controlled shift. The mid-frame latch required a different angle. I pressed the surveyor's lens lightly against the wood and traced the internal seam. The alignment corrected itself in my vision, and I adjusted the tension accordingly. The final latch near the top frame felt older. Its internal hinge carried a slight drag, likely from humidity or age. I compensated by applying steady upward pressure before easing it free. A quiet system message appeared. Precision execution confirmed. Trap detection refined. Disarm efficiency improved. I rose slowly and placed my palm against the door. The wood felt cool and solid. I pushed gently. The door opened inward without resistance. The chamber beyond was wide and circular, reinforced by thick crossing roots that formed a natural dome overhead. Soft amber light filtered down from quartz veins embedded high above, giving the space a steady, warm glow. The air carried a faint metallic scent, clean and dry. In the center of the chamber stood a raised stone platform. On it rested a single chest. No elaborate carvings marked the lid. No dramatic aura surrounded it. It sat square and balanced, iron-banded and quiet. I remained still and let search do its work. No red markers appeared. No active traps detected. Environmental response stable. I walked toward the platform at a measured pace. My boots met the stone evenly, each step deliberate and unhurried. Halfway across the chamber, pale gold text formed near the ceiling. Treasure recognizes restraint. Speed reduces refinement yield. Proceed calmly. I am calm, I murmured, and continued forward. When I reached the platform, I circled it once before touching the chest. The surveyor's lens shimmered faintly, but revealed no hidden seams beyond the visible lock. The lock itself looked straightforward, built for skill rather than trickery. I knelt and drew out my picks. The first pin set smoothly. The second required slightly more pressure. The third held tension for a long second, before aligning with a clean internal click. I eased the lid open. Inside rested 3 items. The first was a folded cloak, deep charcoal with subtle silver threading woven along the inner hem. The material looked lightweight but dense, structured for movement without resistance. Appraisal clarified. Cloak of soft current. Rare. Effect. Enhances silent movement and reduces air disturbance while in motion. Stacks with stealth-based skills. I ran my fingers lightly along the fabric. It felt cool and smooth, structured with purpose. I folded it carefully and set it aside. The second item was a slim metal band, shaped to fit around the wrist. Its surface carried faint geometric etchings similar to the surveyor's lens. Appraisal rose again. Band of measured step. Rare. Effect. Reduces pressure signature when walking on unstable or reactive surfaces. Improves trap bypass precision. That would pair well with the filament field I'd crossed earlier. The third item lay in a shallow velvet-lined compartment beneath the other 2. A small crystalline shard, no larger than a thumb, rested there. It pulsed faintly with internal light that shifted between pale gold and soft white. I lifted it carefully. Dungeon Attunement Shard. Rare. Effect. Allows temporary interface override for minor system adjustments within one floor. Single activation per day. Requires level 4 or higher. I studied the shard in silence. An override. That held weight. Pale gold text appeared again. Clever path selected. Interface access expands with curiosity. You remain within acceptable thresholds. Acceptable to who? I asked quietly. No answer followed. I stood and fastened the band of measured step around my wrist. It tightened slightly, adjusting to fit. The cloak of soft current settled over my shoulders easily, its weight distributing evenly across the leather armor. I tucked the shard into a secure inner pocket of the satchel. A warm pulse moved through my chest. Stealth synergy improved. Movement efficiency increased. Level 4 stabilized. I stepped down from the platform and paused at the chamber's edge. The amber light remained steady. The roots above held firm. No fanfare followed. No sudden escalation. The treasure had been found, and it fit. I turned back toward the corridor, moving with a subtle shift in balance. The cloak guided airflow naturally around my frame. My steps carried less echo across the stone. As I reached the doorway, the surveyor's lens flickered faintly. Return path optimized. Alternate route available. Lower resistance corridor detected. A faint seam revealed itself along the left wall of the chamber. I approached and pressed against it. The wall shifted inward, revealing a narrow descending passage. Treasure rarely marks the end. The system text formed gently. It marks access. I adjusted the cloak at my shoulders and stepped into the newly revealed corridor. Quiet, stable, ready. The hunt had delivered, and the dungeon was still unfolding. The descending corridor narrowed as I moved forward, roots tightening overhead in a clean spiral. The cloak of soft current settled evenly across my shoulders, guiding the air around me without resistance. Each step landed softly, pressure dispersing through the band of measured step without effort. The passage curved once, then ended in a sealed wall of smooth stone. The surveyor's lens warmed faintly against my chest. Fine seams revealed themselves in a slow arc across the surface. No latch appeared, no keyhole waited. A pale gold shimmer formed beside the seam. Interface-compatible surface detected. Attunement shard viable. Override potential limited. I reached into the satchel and drew out the dungeon attunement shard. It pulsed gently in my palm, light shifting between gold and white. The air around it felt steady, not charged, not volatile. I pressed the shard lightly against the center seam. The stone responded immediately. Lines of faint light spread outward from the contact point, tracing a circular pattern across the wall. The override did not force anything open. It adjusted. Root density reduced. Pressure field stabilized. Observation chamber unlocked. The wall eased inward with a low, controlled shift. Beyond it lay a narrow walkway of woven root, extending into open space. I stepped forward. The corridor opened into a vast vertical chamber carved through layers of living root and stone. Far below, Pixie Territory stretched in quiet motion. Faint lights drifting through curved tunnels like slow constellations. The vantage point sat high and secure, A broad root platform formed a natural overlook. Amber quartz veins lined the chamber walls in long, vertical streaks, casting an even glow that held everything in soft clarity. Air moved upward in a slow, consistent current. I walked to the edge and looked down. Pixies moved in their steady patterns. Patrol loops repeated with clean intervals. The filament field I'd crossed earlier shimmered faintly in the distance. From here, it all looked structured, predictable. A quiet notification surfaced. Observation increases comprehension. Comprehension increases control. You are learning the floor. I let the shard cool in my hand before returning it to the satchel. The override had done exactly what it needed to do. No surge, no strain. Below, a patrol cluster shifted formation. The surveyor's lens responded automatically, highlighting faint movement corridors and airflow paths I hadn't noticed before. The cloak rested against my back with balanced weight, and I could feel how it would move through those channels without disruption. The dungeon had not resisted me. It had allowed me to see. I remained there for several long breaths, memorizing the layout, entry routes, blind arcs, points where sound pooled before dispersing. Level 4 felt stable inside me, not louder, just aligned. A final system message appeared near the upper wall. Attunement shard charge expended. Override cooldown, 24 hours. Treasure route complete. I nodded once. The hunt had been clean. No rushing, no escalation, just quiet refinement. I stepped back from the edge and turned toward the passage behind me. The stone doorway remained open, edges traced in faint gold lines that slowly dimmed as I passed through. The corridor back felt easier now. Not because it had changed, because I had. The cloak of soft current guided the air naturally around my movement. The band of measured step absorbed the slight shifts in the floor. Stealth rested close to the surface, requiring no strain to access. When I re-entered the upper corridor, the Pixie patrols drifted through their loops without awareness of my presence. I did not draw the hood. I did not need it. I moved through their gaps with measured timing, allowing each rotation to open a clean path forward. Wings fluttered inches away. Motes of light drifted across my sleeve and dissolved. No disturbance followed. The filament field appeared ahead once more. This time, my steps crossed it in one smooth sequence, weight distributed evenly, air steady, threads unmoved. The system offered no commentary. The earlier chamber with the hidden drawer remained quiet and undisturbed. The lantern flame held its shape. I continued upward. The spiral stair rose through the roots in patient curves, mushrooms glowing softly at each turn. The scent of damp earth lightened with every step. A final notification formed as I approached the upper threshold. Floor 1 safe zone. Proximity restored. Level 4 stable. Skill, synergy increased. I stepped out beneath the canopy of the enormous tree. The valley greeted me in steady afternoon light. Grasses moved in slow patterns. The stream traced its quiet path through the center. Birds drifted between branches in measured arcs. The exit sign remained fixed against the bark, arrow pointing downward with the same calm certainty as before. I adjusted the cloak lightly at my shoulders. Treasure secured. Knowledge expanded. The dungeon remained open. I walked a short distance from the tree and paused, letting the valley settle around me. There was no urgency pulling me back down. There was no pressure to advance further. The day had delivered what it needed to deliver. I stood there for a long moment, breathing evenly, aware of the steady weight of gear and the subtle alignment of new skill. The hunt had ended cleanly, and the floor remained patient.